How's it going, everyone? So for today's video, I wanted to go back to like the artist style videos. Some of you might be aware that we're currently working on volume 4, which is going to be on Sweely, but I felt that the previous artist, Mograb, hadn't quite been covered enough yet. I kind of did a tutorial on like the break, ravey, techno side of his artistic style, and I didn't really cover one of the more common ones, which was on like piano house. So the track that comes to mind is like Love Reigns, but there's one he did recently called Say Nothing, which I saw him play out at a festival, and I basically thought I'd try and recreate it and break down the style, because it's a style that you'd think would be quite basic with mainly like drums, bass and chords, but you've got a lot more going on to try and keep it interesting, keep it driving. I think that's kind of what Say Nothing does a bit more. It kind of dips into the kind of hard groove type style to basically keep things interesting. So we're basically going to be doing a track breakdown of the track Say Nothing by Mograb. So to start off with, you will have heard the track already, but I'll just kind of do a quick run through of like the arrangement and just like my take on it, because I've sketched it out, at least 2 minutes of it. So just to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to be looking at. With the intro, kind of like a pretty driving beat, as I was saying. It's kind of where the hard groove influences come from. And then the piano comes in. That's like the main piano lead. And then you've got the bass. And some like harmony strings, which is quite common in his music. And then the drums strip out, the break. And then you've literally just got the instruments. And at that point you could probably put a vocal as well. I've taken Love Reigns for that, but and a wee vocal chop if you fancy that, but I've muted the vocals because it's not in the original. A bit of a build and then straight into the drop. I'll just extend. So you can see it's like quite simple. So you have to have like the elements like the perks and the hats doing the work of adding energy. And then finally you've got that kind of harmony comes back in. So that is essentially the kind of structure of the track and the kind of main elements you want. Essentially, you want your kick, you want your drums, kind of driven by like a lot of loops and hats adding energy. Quite a simple bass. I didn't manage to get it exactly right, because the way he's mixed it makes it quite hard to hear the original bass, but I've done my own take on it anyway. Like it's got a lot of distortion, saturation and stuff, which we'll talk about. And then the kind of synths group, which is mainly your lead, your chord part, which is like one of the main parts of like the piano house sound, and then kind of like a harmony layer. So we'll go into all of them. The first place we'll begin is with the kick. And this one is just like a 909 fattened up with drum bus. It's actually quite a weak 909 sample I picked, but the fact I can beef it up and it works is fine. So I've added drum bus, and then I've found this plugin recently called Thermal, which is like really good for distortion, and I'll just go on it. Like you can use any distortion plugin really, but this one's quite cool because you can essentially like destroy sounds. So I'll just go on this preset here and then I'll show you what I mean. Like its presets are really good. And like if you're like want to make like really hard hitting, almost techno based kicks, this is a great plugin for that. So I think that was what I was on previously. So I just wanted something that would make the kick punch a bit more. And if we move on to the snare, I've got a few claps and snares layered. This one from a breakbeat, which is a good thing you can do because often when you get these like samples from loops, especially like breakbeat loops and stuff, they've got a specific character within them, which means you can keep the processing very subtle. I've got that. And then I think this one's from like a Gold Baby pack. If you're ever lost for like good drum samples, Gold Baby do a lot of like free stuff. So I've got this snare. I've layered 3 different claps and snares together. And then I've used smack attack to kind of tighten them up. So it's like a transient shaper. What I've essentially done is I brought down the sustain. So they don't carry as long. And then I've put the attack up to add a bit more to it. A bit more like of an accent, a bit more force. And it works quite well in combination with bringing the sustain down. There's reverb on it, and then I've added a saturator in Decapitator. And I've made the sound like quite bright. So that's that. So we already got this. And I meant to say like the kick pattern's like your standard 4/4 with double kicks at the end. Just kind of makes it a bit more interesting. Then we have a bunch of hats. Got a hat loop from the Grab sample pack. I'll link that below if you're interested. There's a lot of like really distorted, saturated samples in there. So I grabbed that like main open hat from that. I've layered it with kind of like probably like a more ride based cymbal. The processing is very subtle. And on that ride cymbal, what I've used Little Older Boy, just to kind of add some drive. I have no idea why. I think I was playing with the pitch and I ended up just not altering the pitch and basically just using it as a distortion as opposed to a pitch manipulation, which is probably its primary use. I've added some distortion, so we're ending up with this. We've got a shuffle hat, which is sidechained, which is basically playing off the open hat, as you'll see. Basically adds energy. It basically creates these two patterns together, create 16ths, which provide nice contrast, and it's not as boring as, say, having one sample play 16ths, which I do have lower down, but it kind of puts your ears towards different things. And it bounces off the main. So if you're ever wanting to create like driving beats and stuff, then it's pretty common, even in like house music and stuff. If you want to create energy, it's basically like your basic standard patterns. So we've got that shuffle, and I always sidechain it, just because otherwise it gets in the way and it clashes, and it's like too constant at a certain volume. You kind of want that kind of bounce. And then we have another loop from the pack. This is kind of like a shuffle, also sidechained. You'll see what I mean about the bounce. And then I've gone a bit mental and I've added a 909 drum machine. But because I'm adding all these layers for energy, I need to basically find a place for them in the mix. So with this next one, it's really low in volume, and it's kind of a similar principle to these two patterns, but on the 909 drum machine, and then it's being phased and auto pan. So it's like going between across the stereo image. And then finally I've got basically like a 16th shaker on an 808 kit. So Ableton stock's really good for these sounds. You might just need to process them a bit more. And you end up with a hi-hat pattern like this. Pretty driving. And then just for like transitions, some crashes. Anything to kind of make the transition between sections a bit smoother, and like 909 crash cymbals are just perfect for that. So that's basically what I have so far, and then I've also got a bit of decapitator on this. The good thing about decapitator is you can alter like how much drive there is. You can also like affect the tone of your sounds. So if you want them like really bright and in your face, you can alter it. But because it's a really sharp sound, you don't really want to like saturate it too much. So I tend to normally have it like further down. Just like really dark hats, almost as if they're being filtered. And then I've just got like a lot of the time when you see these EQs, because you might see me miss them. A lot of time when you see these, it's purely just for cleaning up sounds and automation changes, filtering in and out. So that's why I have these on a lot of the channels and the groups. So that is the hats. And then finally we've got these loops. So I was saying at the beginning about how this kind of genre can easily sound pretty basic. Like if I played the whole loop without the whole kind of track without these loops, it can get quite repetitive very quickly, and there's almost not enough energy. It might sound better if I take the hats out as well, like better to hear in terms of when there's like hardly any energy. This is like a basic loop, and all these other things basically make it more advanced. I'll just turn them back on. So the kind of loop which I kind of associate with hard groove, like Ketama's done a lot of songs fairly recently similar to this, and I might actually consider doing a tutorial based on like hard groove for Ketama, purely because it's kind of sparked my interest when I've been doing this. But this is essentially what I've got. I've got 4 loops, and it kind of adds a lot more energy and makes it a bit more like danceable. I've got the original one kept in just for context, if it will show it. So it's got like the kick and the hats still in there because I couldn't get it perfectly clean. But if I turn it up and you listen out for like the sparse ear candy, like the percussion, there's like a bongo maybe in there. You'll hear like just how much it's adding. Of course there's kicks and like an open hat in that loop as well, but you'll see even when I take that loop out from like my version, you see just how much it adds. So these loops basically help to make that track more interesting, and I've not listened to Love Reigns recently, but it would be interesting to hear how he's kind of build that out. I'd imagine in a similar way, because it's very similar in terms of the elements. So basically we've got a bunch of percussive loops, and like when I was kind of doing the research, essentially what you want to kind of find is like Latin percussion type sounds. If you go into Google and type in hard groove loops, there's like a Reddit thread, I think it's the first one, because I literally did the research a few days ago, and it'll tell you like the kind of sounds you go for, and it'll also point you in the direction of possible like genres you can look at. So it's like Latin percussive grooves, percussive loops even, like it just look in percussive loops, and that's a good start. So I've got a bunch of loops essentially, tribal percussion and that kind of thing, all these kind of keywords. So I've got this one, take it off the sidechain. So that's kind of like the main one. So some advice for like doing this process is things can get messy very quickly when you're stacking up loops, and in an ideal world I'd probably go in and cut so things aren't clashing, but I think I managed to process so that they weren't clashing somehow without making many cuts to these loops, and I spent a lot of time looking for these loops. But you've essentially got this kind of driving force percussion, and it actually sounds off when played with the snare, which is really bizarre. But when it comes in with a kick, I think it's because it was at 124 and the timing was just, I think I kept it at its original timing, which is why it's quite weird, but that's not really relevant anyway. I've got this and different EQs, as you'll see. Added a reverb just to kind of make it a bit more organic. And then something weird I've done is I've sidechained it to the snare. I think because the timing was off on it. Like if I'd sidechained it to the kick, or the sidechain, sorry. It's not as constant because the kick's on every beat. And because I want it to be the main driver, I didn't want to sidechain it to the kick, but I still wanted to sidechain it, so what I did instead was sidechained it to a snare, which was wasn't occurring as much, so it would dip every like 2 and 4. So it basically turns down and ducks whenever the snare comes in, which is quite cool. Mainly for this bit, when it's kind of going into it. I've got that loop. And then I got this kind of hard groove loop, which I might have altered the gate for. No, I didn't. It's just very low in the mix. Basically took this hard groove loop. I think it was from a like sample CD. Can't remember which one, but that's another good source. If you can find like 90s sample CDs, a lot of these have like really nice loops in them. A lot of which have been actually like sampled from records, I believe. I've got this kind of skippy one. And then I think this is like a top loop. As you see, all of these are like really heavily sidechained as well. Because you don't want them taking up the main center of attention, you kind of want them just filling out the background. And then finally I've got this kind of perk rack, an Ableton stock one. Some decent sounds in there, and I basically just added a jam and tried to like kind of fill out the spaces. So just mainly a bongo and like a little hat, which you can't even really hear, but all about adding rhythmic interest. Kind of similar to this. I think I took inspiration for like rhythm from this, from what I could hear in the mix of the original. With different sounds, but I think the placement is pretty similar. So overall the loops sound like this, with the snare. And there's nothing on the group. So that is essentially the drums. It's basically about trying to keep things basic, but then trying to add that energy, especially in this genre. Like, the processing of the kick, at least when I'm hearing it now, makes me actually think it's one that kind of verges more towards the heavier styles of his music. It's quite a fat kick, and that kind of has influenced me maybe going forward, but it's all about kind of starting with those kind of main elements and then trying to add energy. I think the key theme with the majority of his tracks are they're quite high tempo, quite fast, and you basically want to keep things interesting, really. So that's essentially the drums. The next sound, which I had a bit of difficulty actually working out, was the bass. So the original bass, if I can find a clean bit, this was like the clean bit. Because the drums are so like saturated and like, the way it's being mixed makes it hard to hear the exact sound. But I think I'm relatively close, barring like a bit of saturation and stuff, like some work to do on that. So the MIDI, I'll show the MIDI. It basically follows the chords. So we are in, oops. I believe we're in A minor. And you'll see just how like this pattern's just like pretty basic. Literally A down to the F, and some on the grid, some off the grid. Side chains so that it ducks out of the way a bit. Because I was saying about how the hats on the decapitator, you can kind of make them quite dark and quite bright. The bass is quite dark, I would say. So it almost doesn't need to stand out as much. Because when you hear the original, it's the piano and the drums that's doing the work, and the bass is kind of supporting. I've obviously not mixed it the same. So that's the pattern, pretty basic. And I think I started with like an analog bass from Rave Generator. There's like a really nice preset in there. I'll probably talk about it in an upcoming tutorial, because I've used it again. But I started with that, and it was just a bit too analog. Like the sound that we're trying to go for is quite dark. I think it starts quite analog, but it ends up dark. So the next thing I went to was like a kind of tom drum, or like a kick. Not a kick, using like a tom bass. I know like Ketum has done it with the track raw cuts and stuff. And these sounds can be quite hard to, well, they can be easy to shape if you don't have a target sound you're going for. But if you're trying to get a target sound and you're using tom drums, it can be quite hard to get from A to B. But I used this preset, one of the presets from the Mograb sample pack, Big Tom Madness bass. So I used that, and I'll just play. So you basically just get like a plain tom drum, and if you saturate it, I've done other things, but the main thing is like saturating it. This here, the bass parameter, is really good for like fattening up a sound. So like a tom, and then I can turn up the drive, because I want the kind of upper harmonics to come through. So you see the potential of like this kind of tom bass. So I basically saturated it. I've added a bit of R bass to kind of add some intensity, and it actually it basically boosts the frequency spectrum at like 80 to beef it up in the low end, and it's kind of dampened the sound a bit, but we don't want an overly bright sound anyway. I think I've reduced the output anyway. And you basically end up with this like really fat sound. So that's basically my attempt at the kind of main bass, and I haven't parallel compressed or anything. That's that. And we've basically got a sub layer underneath just to kind of fatten it up even more. But all you really do is feel it. Like you can't really hear it. But that's fine. Basically an operator with the octave turned down and that turned up. That's literally all I've done. And more saturation and then sidechain. Sidechain is key if you can't already tell by the fact like every channel is sidechained. And then I've got more saturation on the group to kind of glue them together, as well as glue compressor, funnily enough, to also glue it together. So there's a lot I could do, but I didn't want to waste time going around in endless circles tweaking that sound. I also had a Reese bass, which I think I showed in the second MoGrab tutorial I did, which is quite a nice bass alternative you can use, but I think I thought I started off with a Reese because when I was listening in the mix, I could hear something being sustained, but it was just the way it was mixed in the end. So yeah, that will all be available in the project anyway, so experiment at will if you want to get that. The next sound is this piano. Pretty catchy melody. It's basically all on the scale. That bit's different. I didn't get that perfect. I think it's like later in the process, like it shifted over, but there or thereabouts. So a nice melody like that, and the chain is pretty standard for pianos. I don't tend to change it much at all. Essentially your most basic effects, your EQ, compression, reverb and delay, and then you can add like modulation. And then I used the American init, basically the default preset from the Piano V Arturia. It's like one of my favorite plugins for piano. So that's essentially that sound. Just a nice lead, because if you don't have the lead, I find it can sound quite boring. And the genre is piano house, so you might as well have a nice piano lead in there, you know. That's that. Then we're on to the chords, which are basically just the same pattern stacked. So we've got a piano and a synth. The piano sounds like this. With the kick. And then if we add the synth, so a nice stacked chord there, because that is the driving force. And I think he's primarily used a piano, but I could have used a lot more pianos, but I wanted to basically fatten up the sound. And I know there are other songs where he's used like synths in combination, or just purely synth chords. Like, I'm saying that we're looking at piano house, but in theory you could base it on any of his chord orientated music. So I basically got that, and we'll just go into the chords again. A minor down to just A minor with the top note moved down, and basically inverted. If you look into like chord inversion, that's what it is. And then a B, no, an E minor, E minor. So basically A down to E minor. And then you've got this little change up here, which isn't the exact same as the original, but we're We're not trying to purely copy, are we? So that. And that's the MIDI. If we just talk briefly about the instruments, it's mainly just different pianos layered on top of one another. This is like the main one you hear. And they're panned and stuff, just to make that sound more fit. And then we have this audio effects chain, which I've actually turned off because I think I started at the piano. And then when I added the synth layer, which is basically just two synths from Analog Lab. If you're looking for a good like synth bundle, I always recommend Arturia. I think that's probably the main one I'd go to, where all these piano sounds and you get like Rhodes and organs and stuff with the different plugins they offer. Definitely check that out. So I've got the like, piano, and then I'll just go on. Just different sounds. Analog Lab's good because you can basically access all the different plugins, so like the Piano V and stuff that I talked about. And then this synth layer. Got this. This sound just kind of reminds me of Mograb, I don't know why. And then this one. Cleaned up. So that's all 5 layers together as one chord, sounds quite nice. And then on the processing, I've basically got what I had on the individual channels turned off, but I did it as one group to basically make them a bit more consistent. So I compressed them together, cleaned them together, and then added reverb delay and then sidechained them together. Like, there's no one or the other, right? But if you want your sounds kind of working a bit more in unison, group processing can be the way to do that. But there's nothing stopping you going and processing them separately as well. And then the final thing we have is just a kind of harmonic layer. He likes to kind of add like these top line harmonies. And you can basically use pads, strings, that kind of thing. Anything. So it'll tend to be introduced maybe in like the breakdown, and then taken out and then introduced again in the drop. And you can see just how simple it is. Like, just play along with a keyboard or something and begin to like kind of feel what's right. So it adds a bit of tension. I basically got 2 like drone sounds from Analog Lab. It's not even relevant what the sounds are. You can pick strings, you can pick pads, you can do anything. And then various modulation and stuff to basically make them more interesting. So yeah, that's basically going to be it for this one. I hope you found it useful and learned something about his kind of piano house type tracks. The exception to this one being that it's perhaps more verging towards like the hard groove style, at least with the drums. But I hope you found it interesting nevertheless. Remember, if you want the project, that will be included in the description, and if you want all the samples and a bunch of samples related to Mograb himself, then do be sure to check out the Mograb sample pack, because I did spend a lot of months on it and I've had really good feedback on it in terms of like how close it is to his sound. So those are the 2 resources I'd urge you to check out. I'll leave a video on screen if you want to carry on watching, and if you don't want to carry on watching, then remember to subscribe on your way out, and I'll see you again soon.